A very good day and warm welcome to all our viewers on Fair AI's Thought Leader Speak series. We are very fortunate that we are starting this series with Mr. Prabhat Labh, CEO of Grameen Foundation India, a wholly owned subsidiary of Grameen Foundation USA, and a leading player in the Indian social impact space. They have come out with a very remarkable algorithm technology-based tool aimed at social sector intervention, COVID-19 emergency relief to be more specific. Prabhat, first of all, tell us a quick overview of the activities that GFI has been doing, and especially the algorithm tool that you have pioneered.
Sure. Thank you. Good morning, Sourajit. So Grameen has been working in the space of financial inclusion, digital financial literacy, and self-employment for quite some time. When this COVID-19 happened, we recognized very quickly that this is a crisis which is going to hit a very large number of people around the country. And then we have been thinking, what's the best way to help people in such a scenario when a pandemic hits so many people all at once? So based upon the research on disaster relief, from last several decades, we realized that things like an unconditional cash transfer program is the best way to help people, because it gives power in the hand of people, that they have the cash and they can choose to spend it on whatever is most relevant and most useful for them at that point of time. But one of the big dilemma in unconditional cash transfer programs is, how do you do the beneficiary selection? How do you identify the person who is most needy and most deserving? And that's where the idea of this kind of tool came in. And from our own work in the space of poverty and long decades of experience understanding poverty, we also realized that for low-income people, there are multiple sources of vulnerability. It's not just economic, but a number of social factors also combine to make a person or a household vulnerable. Things like, whether that person is disabled, whether that person has a job that is vulnerable, like migrant people, whether that person has people at household, like, single parent households, or, people with old age who cannot walk out, cannot do things. So we decided to kind of develop a vulnerability index, which can look into all of these different parameters and give us an objective measure of a household's vulnerability in this kind of situation. Because once that is done, then the job is easy. Then we have fantastic digital payment platforms in the country which can be used to send out unconditional cash to households very, very quickly. So that's where the idea came from.
The use of technology in the social space has been very limited so far, which is what makes your tool a pioneer of sorts. So have there been any specific limiting factors that have affected the use of new technology solutions, tools in the social space? Anything specific to the social sector? And moreover, the other reason for asking this is that, as a social sector organization, your priorities would obviously be different from a typical bottom line profit chasing commercial organization. So what were the specific challenges you may have faced?
Right. So absolutely. I think two aspects I would like to point out. One is that Grameen as an organization, from its early days, has been one organization which has always leveraged various kinds of technologies, digital technologies, to solve the social problems at scale. So in that sense, we are a pioneer in that space. But coming to the more important question as to why social impact organizations often are not able to leverage these kind of tools, digital technology, to amplify the impact of their work, which is that when you want to do anything like this, you have to have a strong in-house capability technology team. And now, when it comes to the core business of social impact organizations, it's to help people. So often they find it difficult to cobble up resources to convince the donors to invest in these kind of digital capabilities in the organization. And without that investment, organizations don't really have the capability to employ and deploy these kind of technologies, which kind of constrains the social impact organizations from leveraging what is possible. And also there's one more aspect, is that social impact organizations are also very concerned about the principle of doing no harm. So often they might decide to wait till something is proven. Things like, there's a lot of debate about artificial intelligence technologies and the ethical questions around them, the question of safeguards, data protection, all of that. So social impact organizations tend to take a more conservative view that unless and until we have a foolproof model, let's not venture into new ideas, just the way an entrepreneurial organization would get into, in order to make sure that that they stick to that do no harm principle. So that's the larger sectoral perspective. But as I mentioned, Grameen, of course, has been one organization which has always believed in leveraging technology to amplify the impact of our work.
So while Grameen has been a pioneer, are there any other examples from the social space that you think stand out in terms of leveraging technology to address social sector interventions? Any other players apart from GFI who has been doing this?
Absolutely. I think there are some really good examples. One example I can give is, let's say there's an organization called Digital Green. So Digital Green is an organization that leverages digital technology to drive farmer extension, agricultural extension work amongst smallholder farmers. So what they promote is farmer-to-farmer extension. So farmers can make short videos using their local traditional knowledge about how to solve things like pest attack on crop and what do you do. And so farmers make their own videos and then they share it amongst the other farmers. So which is a very effective way of transferring knowledge, because the trust that the farmers enjoy is immense. So Digital Green is definitely one example. There are lots of other organizations who have used innovative tools in the areas of health solutions. Also in education now we are seeing leverage these kind of things. Grameen is an organization which leverages IVR technology for data collection and not just data collection, but also sending out IVR messaging on various platforms. BBC Media Action is another organization which has leveraged digital technology in the health space. So yeah, there are some players who are doing really great work in leveraging technology for social impact.
Coming to the theme of responsible use of technology, so your application in this context definitely addresses one aspect of responsible use. But can an application like yours also be used for other interventions, say, for example, in the microfinance space, agri-credit space, where it sort of, marries with the entire rural story plus digital story? The same platform is being leveraged for multiple purposes. Can it be used in that perspective?
Absolutely. In fact, within Grameen, we had worked on another tool, which is like an AI tool to run emotional analytics, which can be used by microfinance institutions to do credit underwriting decisions. So, depending on what's the purpose you're looking for, let's say if you are to make a credit decision, then you want to look at various aspects of the soundness of the business model, which of course does not require AI kind of technology, but you can AI can definitely make it faster. You can fast track the process. But you also want to look at the credit worthiness of the client, the character, what kind of personality traits and behaviors that person has, how confident the person is about their own business venture. So all of these things, technology can really do a fantastic job in determining all of these parameters and help you arrive at very quick decisions. And the other thing is that these tools, especially with machine learning capability, can over a period of time improve themselves. As they get more data, the tools can improve themselves. So yeah, I mean, let's say if you're lending to a micro borrower, you of course, let's say you're convinced about the soundness of the business model and you decide to lend, but you also want to see, okay, how robust the business model is to face various kinds of uncertainties. You want to run a kind of stress test, and that's where this kind of vulnerability index profiling that we are doing through Grameen Forgiving tool can act as a complement that to protect your downside risk. So absolutely, there are multiple ways these kind of tools can be leveraged. You mentioned about agricultural credit. In agricultural credit, there are multiple other factors which might come into play. It's not just the borrower risk, but also production side risk, which is influenced by the weather phenomena. You have also the market risk, which determines, okay, how much the price might be in 2 years, 2 or 3 months time of a certain commodity. And you want to make your, cropping decisions based upon the price forecasting. There are now tools. In fact, even Grameen has those kind of tools called Farm Development Plan and LedgerLink, which takes into account these multiple parameters, the climatic factors, cost of production, all of that, and come up with farm level plan, which helps farmers make their farming decisions. So absolutely, there are lots of such examples. But I must also say that these are great examples, but we have to take these great examples to great scale. That's what we have not seen happening so far.
So in fact, your tool gives the opportunity to test that very aspect now, doesn't it?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, this Grameen for Giving, and given the very robust digital payments infrastructure that we have in the country, aided by the unique identification, the Aadhaar that we have, and mobile phones in the hands of very large number of people. So we have everything else is set up. The moment you are able to identify the right person, the right beneficiary, then everything works. And that's where this tool that we have developed fills a very critical gap in that. So tomorrow, if the government wants to run some kind of a universal basic income project, that okay, the bottom 50% of people below poverty line, let's give them a universal basic income in terms of social protection, then this kind of tool can really come handy.
So in fact, you mentioned about the vulnerability index being the main backbone of this entire tool. Please help our viewers to just understand how the entire methodology of making this platform, making this app, I mean, in terms of the talents involved, in terms of the inter-department collaborations, in terms of, what sort of assistance you may have required from external partners. So how did that entire ecosystem evolve for you while making a solution like this?
That's definitely a great question. And whenever you are trying to design something as complex as this, you do need multiple different kinds of talent. It's not just the tech talent, people who can write software codes, which you require. That, of course, is critical. But basically, you have to define a programming logic. You have to understand what is vulnerability and what could be the different sources of vulnerability. We are fortunate that in Grameen Foundation, from two perspectives. One is that Grameen was also the pioneer of this tool called Progress Out of Poverty Index, in short PPI, which is a very low cost and very efficient way of measuring the probability of a household falling under poverty. And that tool has been replicated across 62 countries around the world. So it's a low cost tool, and we already had that tool. We are the ones who developed that tool. So we took some indicators from that PPI tool. Then we also combined other social, vulnerability index kind of parameters that I mentioned before, like, your disability status, your suffering from chronic disease, or orphan children, or single parent household, those kind of stuff. We also are fortunate to have a very strong research and evaluation department within Grameen, so which kind of helps us in the learnings from our research evaluation as to what makes a household vulnerable. So it was a collaborative project involving the project team, the research evaluation team, our health specialist who looks into health vulnerability and health vulnerability contributing to poverty, and of course the technology team. So in a sense, we are quite fortunate in Grameen Foundation to have these kind of these kind of capabilities sitting in-house. But it's also how you facilitate collaboration between these different departments, these different teams. That becomes a very crux of what makes an organization successful in today's era. You can have different capabilities sitting in different corners. Unless they collaborate, you can't have something as impact making as this.
In fact, as someone has said, people are becoming the main asset in especially services-based sectors. How would you handle the ethical aspects of making a technology tool like this? Because where automation and algorithms and AI come in, a huge discussion and debate is around the ethical aspects. So how did you manage the ethical aspects in your while making your solution and while implementing it on ground?
So whenever you use any kind of algorithm, you always have the problem of what is called as false negative and false positive. Now in this situation, because COVID has impacted just so many people around the country, that we were not so bothered about the chances of, let's say, false positive, which means that somebody who's not so vulnerable getting identified as vulnerable and hence receiving benefit. If 1 out of 10 such cases happen, even that person would be somewhat vulnerable, if not the most deserving. So our major concern was not about the false positive cases. Our major concern in this case was dealing with the false negative instances. And so let's say, a person has decent income, has land holding. So maybe this kind of tool might reject that person. So in that case, that's where we have created this interface and given an override capability to the project selection committee. So if they find that there is one crippling weakness or crippling vulnerability that the household has, let's say the household has a person who is suffering from a chronic disease, or let's say a household which is otherwise perfect on all of the counts, but has had a COVID infected person. So, no matter if they're not vulnerable from other aspects, just one health incidence can make them extremely vulnerable. So that's why we have tried to build the whole system in a way, combining human intelligence and machine intelligence, that we deal with the false negative kind of situations more effectively. Yeah, so I think, in short that. And of course, when you have a large scale calamity like this, the chances of a wrong selection is you can't be too wrong in terms of, you can't go very wrong in terms of, even if some less deserving people got the benefit, because if you want to make the system too perfect, too foolproof, then the chances of you coming up with a lot of false negative recommendations will increase and making it the whole tool less effective. So in that sense, you choose to live with a little bit of imperfection in your design.
That's a story of life, in fact. Yeah. So sorry.
That's why you still need human beings behind and at the top of technology. You can't let the machines run the world as yet.
So you spoke about identification, onboarding, and disbursement being areas where the application has given some use. What about the monitoring aspect, especially monitoring that the beneficiary is using it for the correct purpose, he's not misusing it? How does the tool address that aspect?
So we do deploy this tool in those geographies where we have our own last mile agent network and last mile presence. So our plan is that we will not disperse the entire benefit in one tranche. We will give them in small tranches over a period of 3 months, and each month we will ask them, okay, last month you received some money from us. What did you do? We are not trying to be prescriptive whether you should use the money to buy food or to buy medicine or to pay for education or to pay for transport if you want to go back to where you were working earlier. But at least in terms of if we are able to gather the data in our future endeavors, that will help us is to what kind of client profiles are there who need the support more, and how it helps people in dealing with different kinds of vulnerability. And also the question of getting back on your feet. What kind of interventions might be needed to help those households get back on the feet. So monitoring is an important aspect without being prescriptive about how you use the money. We also always hear the question, oh, you're giving money to people. What if they decide to spend it on buying alcohol? I mean, there might be some such instance that might happen. But in order to prevent that one or a few rare instances, you don't want to take the power away from the people to make their own decisions. I think people dealing with development issues need to recognize that you have to have people in charge of their own lives. You can't go on kind of monitoring and policing every aspect of their life. Only when people have the power and confidence to make their own decisions, that's when true and development would happen.
So Prabhat, what about the training and monitoring aspect of your field workers who are actually going on ground, implementing this app with various beneficiaries, doing the actual job on ground? What was the experience in terms of training them on the app, in terms of ensuring that the work they are doing on ground is happening in a prim and proper manner?
So again, in a lockdown situation, that's a very important component. How do you train your frontline workers, your field force, on any new system, any new technology? And again, that's where we have been fortunate that we have been making these technology investments for quite some time. So we have an mobile learning tool called Grameen Learning Platform, which we have developed over the last 4 years. And we have quite a few modules on that already. And it was used by our field force for getting trained on things like financial education, digital financial literacy, and a lot of other financial related modules. So it just required us to build some quick modules on that platform and give access to that platform to our field force that, okay, this is the new module, Grameen for Giving app. This is how you download it. This is how you use the app. This is the kind of troubleshooting features. We set up a helpline number that in case you have encountered any difficulty, you can call up this number and get help instantly. So yeah, I mean, working in this domain at the intersection of social development and deploying technology again requires years of investment and lots of capability that you build over a period of time. You can't just do the transformation or that leap overnight. That okay, let me build a tool, because there are other things that you would need to do to make that tool successful. So in that sense, again, we have been fortunate in Grameen to have made those investments over years.
So what are your thoughts on the criticality of using technologies like artificial intelligence to augment this reach of human workforce into activities where human manpower was traditionally limited? For example, social sector stands out here. So what are your thoughts on this? That how much scalable, how much, the level of outreach that can be created by these technologies?
So yeah, I mean, if you look at the government programs and government efforts under, say, National Rural Livelihood Mission or various state rural livelihood missions, we are working with millions of self-help groups around the country in remote parts of various districts and villages. Now that's a network that already exists. What that network is not capable, has not been enabled to do right now is what else they can do with the power of that network. Imagine, you have growers of a particular fruit or a vegetable or a particular agricultural commodity. Somebody is growing 10 kilos, somebody is growing, 1 quintal, somebody is growing, 10 quintal, and that's disaggregated around the country in various places. What if, you have a tool which allows you just to aggregate that information, that we have 10,000 farmers in 5 districts having 25 tons of a certain product, say ginger or, honey or whatever. Then that gives you the power that you can go and negotiate with a retail chain, agricultural retail chain, or an e-commerce platform, and which can help you get a better access to markets. Similarly, you can also then have greater bargaining power in the hands of people because of that effect of aggregation. And it's not a physical aggregation; it's more like a virtual aggregation. The product doesn't need to travel from one place to other to aggregate. It just needs to travel from the producer to the consumer, and rest everything else happens digitally. If you look at the transformation in our economy, starting from agriculture being 50% contributor of GDP about 50 years ago, today agriculture's contribution is around 16-17%. Manufacturing sector contribution is also on the decline, whereas services sector now contributes to a humongous part of our GDP. Now, if you talk about how somebody can participate in services sector, and especially women, then I think entry barriers to participate in services sector is much less compared to participation in agriculture sector or participation in manufacturing sector. So I think we have opportunity today to ensure greater engagement of women in various economic activities, and to make sure that a greater part of whatever GDP we are having, whatever value add is happening, accrues to the women and other vulnerable sections by leveraging these kind of technologies that we have today.
Sure. So can the GFI application actually be combined, or do you have a vision to partner with the national level digital tools of the government to take social impact to scale?
Absolutely, absolutely. We would definitely like to collaborate with, say, the state rural livelihood missions to see the large network of self-help groups and federations, women's federations that they have, how they can add more value to whatever they're doing, how their incomes can be enhanced, how they can have greater market access. We definitely would like to collaborate with both the state rural livelihood missions as well as at the national level with somebody like Niti Aayog, which kind of sits at, which is the national level think tank to think about what the future might look like. So we'd definitely like to join hands and collaborate with these kind of organizations.
Sure, Prabhat. So as a last thought, you mentioned about some case studies that from the Indian context who are leveraging technology for social impact. Any examples from the global context that comes to your mind?
So globally, of course, in the space of agriculture, we see a number of countries, deploying agricultural technology in different kind of agricultural value chains, both on the side of enhancing production or production-related interventions, as well as to enhance market access. You also are seeing a huge use of technology in the health space to address vulnerability, to kind of to make healthcare available through platforms like telemedicine and low-cost diagnostic centers. So that's also happening in different countries. In terms of use of technology for skilling, that's a huge area. And after COVID in India also, we are seeing that there's huge interest in being able to impart education, skill development without the need to come to a physical classroom. So I think, yeah, I mean, you name it, whether it's education or health or agriculture, there are things happening, and the potential is much more, both in other countries as well as in India.
Thank you, Prabhat, for sharing your insights about your tool and on the convergence of technology in the social space. We wish you all the best going ahead. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sourajit. It was wonderful to speak to you, and I hope through this interview series that you have started, we get many more ideas from many more innovators from all around the world. Thank you.
Thank you.